Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar. We're going to talk about API management and Kubernetes. I think it's going to be a very interesting topic today. But before we go into the actual presentation and the webinar, let's kind of remind folks, for you regulars, you probably know this, but we do have a YouTube channel where you can look at all the past webcasts we've done. We also present most of the content which Apigee produces on SlideShare for you to reuse or share with your colleagues. And of course, we want to continue this dialogue after the webcast on community.apigee.com. So feel free to join us there and post any questions or suggestions or any of the tips you might have. Today, we're going to start the webinar. My name is Bala. I head up product management at Apigee, and a lot of the content you're going to see today is done by my colleague Mukunda. Mukunda, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, this is Mukunda. I'm a solution architect with Apigee.
Okay, so Kubernetes and Apigee. So Mukunda, we know that a lot of our customers, when I talk to them, are starting to think about containerization.
Yeah.
They're building new microservices. And when they think about that, they feel Kubernetes is a great way and a great infrastructure to do that.
Right.
It's open source. It can be done on cloud, on premises. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And I can see that trend kind of picking up, and a lot more customers are talking about it and doing it.
Yes.
Then, of course, you and I both talk to a lot of customers on API management, and a lot of our customers are using Apigee for doing API management, which is more than a gateway,
right.
And we provide a fairly holistic solution. So the first question I think our audience is going to have is like, where's the intersection and why I think about these two in the same box?
Right. So I think, so if you look at our solution itself, right, so one part is the gateway, which allows customers to bring the APIs and manage them and do all the other aspects on consumption, provisioning these APIs to developers and so on and so forth. So we were building all the tools necessary for customers to manage the APIs wherever they are. So typically these were ESBs, cloud applications, package software.
Yep.
Now, as you know, we are talking to a lot of customers, and then they're actually starting to build APIs in Kubernetes and microservices platform, and they're starting to build microservices. So I think the goal here is for us to see how can we make API management for the APIs that are built in this new stack easier, and how can we natively integrate and make this experience seamless for developers.
Got it.
Yeah.
So in effect, we're saying that you can have your legacy systems, which you may have APIs, which you want to proxy through us and manage.
Correct.
You may have existing applications which are already have modern API endpoints, and we can manage that.
Yeah.
And then in where people are building new applications and microservices, there again we want to be able to give them a very clean native experience for managing those APIs.
Yes.
And as I look at this slide, it also shows Cloud Foundry, and we've done a few webcasts in the past where we've done similar integration with Pivotal Cloud Foundry, for example, right, where we are able to manage APIs or microservices being built and hosted on PCF.
Right.
That's
right.
So I guess this is the next logical step to say that if you're not a PCF customer or if you are more inclined to do things in Kubernetes, how do we help you?
Exactly.
Fair enough?
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
So with that context, let's get started. But I guess the whole point of managing all these APIs through Apigee is also to give customers the ability to do this fast.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's one of the primary criteria when we think about why are we even doing this integration, right? So how can we quickly manage all the APIs wherever they are? We had built all the tooling for ESBs and application software. Now, Cloud Foundry, Kubernetes. So what does it take? So we internally use, and even we talk to customers about the value chain, right?
Yeah.
So this serves as a framework for us to define how the delivery model looks like and how fast we can accelerate. The one way to think about this is, if you want to deliver an experience to a customer, to deliver such an experience to the customer, what are the capabilities that you need in the app? And if you want those capabilities in the app, what are the APIs and who is going to build them? They are partners, internal employees, or third-party developers, right? So you need to have a view around that. And once you know who is going to build and what kind of functionality they need access to, then you go and start building APIs.
Yeah.
So typically what you have seen customers do is they adapt their existing stuff on the API management layer. Now, the good thing is they're starting to build new APIs in Kubernetes and microservices, PCF, and so on and so forth, right?
So the principle here you're highlighting is that start with the focus on who's going to use those APIs,
right,
and then do the right thing for that customer of your APIs.
Yes.
And in this context, what you're saying is a lot of people are starting to build their backends differently.
Yes. So they're starting to build their backends differently. And then I think the obvious next question is, you know what, I have these APIs. Now, first thing comes to mind for developers is, hey, I need security. I need traffic management, right? So people always think about, you know what, I need a gateway to protect this. So that's where it starts. Yes, obviously you need to protect this, which is very important. You need traffic management. You need visibility to what's really going on. I think the important piece is also to understand, after you publish these APIs, how is somebody going to get access to these APIs? Are you publishing a catalog of your APIs? What is the process for that? How are developers going to find your APIs? Do you have a developer portal, or do you publishing sample documentation, SDKs, test tools? How somebody is going to get credentials to access the API? Is it self-service, or is it like call somebody and wait for a key, right? So all these things you need to take care of it. So gateway is the first step, and after you have the gateway, there's a whole consumption around that, how we are going to give this access to developers. So that's the key part of the API management platform. And once you have it, I mean, next key piece is getting visibility, right? Visibility across the value chain. You deliver the experience. Do you know who is using it? And how many customers are using it? How many customers are still on the old experience? Same from an operational perspective, how are you going to measure your traffic patterns, your latencies? Are you serving customers across the different regions, the same level of SLAs, right? So this is what Apigee offers. And the goal of this talk is, you know what, this all, we already have it. Now, if you're building APIs in Kubernetes, and how we can take advantage of all the other things and make it seamless. So that's what we're going to talk today.
Okay. So just to close out, so we're going to make sure that whatever we do today for all the APIs you've been doing in the traditional way, we're going to give the same value for the new APIs you're going to build in Kubernetes, and that's kind of the purpose of the session today.
More than same value, I think it is equally important for understand, like, if you're building APIs in Kubernetes, not just you don't need all this. This is equally important.
Got it.
And we are going to deliver the same experience for all the stacks.
Okay. So let's get started. So today I think we're going to cover kind of 4 key things. We're going to quickly go through a Kubernetes refresher. I think most of the customers might be familiar with it, but some of them who may not be, we want to give them the basic concepts.
Right.
And then I think we're going to talk about how an external developer consumes an API which you built on Kubernetes, how an internal developer, and deliberately we're choosing external and internal developer here, even though from a Kubernetes point of view, external and internal may mean slightly different things, right? Because this is typically how our customers think about it.
Right.
That's why we wanted to talk about this. And then last but not the least, number 4, we're going to share how we have used our own product as a secret sauce to do some of the automation.
Correct.
And how we manage the Kubernetes APIs, and which our customers can also take advantage of.
Right.
Okay. So with that, why don't I let you begin with the Kubernetes refresher?
Okay, let's get started. So again, the idea is not to go through what Kubernetes is, right? So this is to get level set on what are the use cases we are going to talk about. We are going to cover all the 3 use cases. Let's set some context and then see what it really means, right? So one, so I think most of you might be familiar with Kubernetes, even if not. So a pod is a Kubernetes concept. It's a basic unit of any deployment in Kubernetes. As you know, Kubernetes is a open source software stack for manage, deployment, scaling, and management of container applications. So a basic unit of deployment is a pod, and a pod contains one or more containers, right? So, for example, if you see the slide here, so it can have one or more containers. These are your applications. So the services, what you build, are packaged as containers, and it becomes a part of the pod and deployed in Kubernetes. So your applications would expose some services or HTTP endpoint, let's say, right? And in a typical Kubernetes fashion, the way you deploy pod is in multiple replicas. So this is what the deployment of your container application look like. So the way to get access to your application is through a Kubernetes service. A service is again another abstraction within Kubernetes that provides you service routing and discovery for your applications. So now this becomes entity or some kind of abstraction, some unit. You can call it application, you can call it microservice, right? We can call it just an API, right? So they're all the same. So, but this becomes one deployment unit of an API or a microservice. Now, in a typical Kubernetes cluster, you would have one or more of this, right? And obviously, there'll be more, maybe hundreds of this. Now, the way after you have the services in Kubernetes, there are basically two access patterns in respect of the partner, internal, external. Right? There are only two ways customers are going to access this service. Either if you look at the top bottom, right? So there are applications or containers that are running within the same Kubernetes cluster, which is trying to call another service within the same cluster. Microservice to microservice communication within the same cluster. And everything outside the cluster. So anything outside the cluster is external. It could be partner, it could be your internal employees, it could be your third-party developers, it could be just another application, it could be just another Kubernetes cluster or whatever it is, right? Anything outside of the Kubernetes cluster, we are just calling it external.
Got it. So just to recap, anything which is coming from outside the cluster is external.
Yeah.
Anything calling from within the cluster from one app or one microservice to another is internal.
Yes.
And the context we're going to go into is independent of this being external or internal call in the Kubernetes context.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about what it means to access it as an external developer,
Yes.
meaning who doesn't belong to that company.
Correct.
And then use case where we talk about employees of the same company trying to access it internally.
Yes.
And these can be mutually exclusive in terms of concepts.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right. Those are, I think we don't want to overload this. This is very specific. The internal external distinctions between whether you are within the cluster, outside the cluster.
Yes.
So the use case 2, if you look at the Bala slide, so we are going to first talk about how we are going to manage the external APIs. And then we are going to come and talk about how we are going to manage the internal APIs. And this might all look like magic, but eventually at 4, we are going to actually show how we are doing this. And what are the advantages of doing in our approach. And we'll list all the other things.
So when we talk about external development consumption, picture to kind of share with customers is this is the easiest way to describe how an external developer access the API, correct?
So this is simple. So if you are familiar with Edge, right, this may not be surprising. So this is just another HTTP endpoint. You proxy that through the gateway, and then you get all the benefits of the value chain, right? So, but I think the key here is you can do this today without the integration story what we are going to talk about. You can go create an API in Kubernetes, create a proxy in Edge, and you're good to go, right? I think the goal, what we want to get is, we want to make this really easy, right? We want to make it really fast, easy, and automated fashion. So that's the goal of this setup of what we are going to do today. So probably I think it'll be easier if we get into a demo of how we are doing this and what this integration looks like. Okay, let me start sharing my screen. I hope audience can also see the screen. There you go. Okay, so for the purpose of this demonstration, so what I have is a very simple hello world application. Again, the goal is to demonstrate the integration rather than the complexity of the application, right? So let's take a very simple Node.js application, hello world. And what I have done is I have created a Docker image for this container, and then we are going to deploy this in Kubernetes and see how we can take advantage of the Apigee tooling to manage this APIs. So I have a hello deployment. It's a deployment YAML descriptor. I want to deploy this Mukunda Node.js hello, which is my image name, and I'm running a 2 replicas. So this is a pod specification. I'm going to deploy this in 2 replicas. I also have a service to access my deployment. So I'm creating a service on port 80 of type load balancer. So now let's go ahead and set this up. Okay. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my kube context. Okay, done. And now let's go ahead and create a Kubernetes service. So I'm just going to use the same Kubernetes tooling to create a new deployment. I'm just going to call this hello deployment.yaml. So what I showed you earlier. So this is going to create a new deployment. So a deployment is created. Let's look at what it looks like. I'll also go ahead and create a new service. The service we have already configured, hello service. So if you remember, we are just using the Kubernetes tooling to create the deployment and service. So now I should be able to do things like get pods. Hello deployment pod is created. Let's go and check the service status. kubectl describe service So as you can see here, it is still trying to create the load balancer. So because the type is load balancer, and you can see the cluster IP. So for internal consumer, the third use case what we'll cover, they will actually go through the internal IP.
Got it.
Now it's actually creating a load balancer. It usually takes about a minute.
Mm-hmm.
After the service is created, we can access that through the load balancer IP. So what you would find is once it is set up, you would find the load balancer. So what we would do from Apigee standpoint is we would automatically provision a proxy for your API in Edge automatically. And when you describe a service after the load balancer is provisioned, you would actually start seeing an Apigee endpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try this again. Hello service. It usually takes about a minute. Okay, there you go. So now you see the load balancer ingress. So it's actually showing an Apigee endpoint.
Yes.
So the developer did not even go touch the UI or anything of such. Now I should be able to access my Hello World service through my Apigee endpoint.
Got it.
As you can see, I get a Hello World back. So now what really happened, just to recap, so we deployed a pod in Kubernetes, we created a service, and when a service was created, the integration actually automatically provisioned a proxy and provided an endpoint for you. Now, as consumers, you can go ahead and use it. And obviously, if you're familiar with Edge, it's very straightforward to enable security, add global policies. That way, you can by default, any services that are exposed to external world are protected with certain level of security and traffic management, but also get analytics, right? So very quickly, what really happened behind the scenes? I'm just going to go to the Edge UI. So for people who are new to this is the Edge tool itself, the user interface where I can go and look at all the different things. So let's go and look at the API. You can see the Hello service got created automatically a minute ago, and this is actually provisioned directly. And then
so this is a proxy which is mapped directly to the Hello service.
Hello service
in Kubernetes. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
This is directly mapped. Yeah. And so for people familiar with Edge, right? So now you know you can do a bunch of stuff here. Now once you have it, you can take advantage of all the out-of-the-box policies and manage it. Typically, what administrator would do is they would create global policies, flow hooks or shared flows.
Yes.
That will enforce a default set of policies for any proxy. That way you can manage compliance. Like, you know what, whatever you're doing, any service that is exposed will have OAuth. It will talk to the OAuth provider. It will have traffic management. You will log to a centralized logging system, and you will get analytics. So you could enforce those things.
Yes.
So that's basically the external access story.
So the good news here is, if I can recap, one, the developer can just focus on building their service on Kubernetes, right? And then the second one is once they enable it as enable the service, automatically we provision a proxy for it.
Yes.
Right. And then once the proxy is there, we can take advantage of not only all the Apigee Edge functionality,
yes,
which is to give them things like out-of-the-box 30+ policies, or even add extensibility through our call-out code.
Yep.
What you're saying is you can even go one level higher, and with some of the new beta features we just announced, an administrator or somebody with a higher privilege could put some global policies for security or other purposes, like logging, like you mentioned.
Correct.
So that every proxy is automatically enabled for those policies out of the gate when it goes into production.
Any access outside is always protected with this policy.
Correct.
So that's one of the criteria for any security checklist.
Got it. Okay. And we've been able to do all this without having to go and educate every developer who's building a service on Kubernetes about Edge, but making them work together really, really well.
Yes.
Fair?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
So that's a demo for the external use case. Now let's switch gears. The next thing we want to talk about is the internal use case.
Yes.
Okay.
So obviously,
walk us through that.
when we talk about this is all great when access is outside the cluster. Now, can you manage access within the cluster? So that's exactly what the story is here. So now if you look at this picture, so what we have done here is we have a distributed gateway which is available as a Docker container that you can deploy wherever you want. In this case, you can also deploy this as a sidecar container within your pod. So what it allows you to do is you can proxy your container applications within your pod. And as you know, the sidecar containers, they can actually talk localhost, and you can proxy that within the pod, which means if you go to the next slide where you will see the way to expose this is using a service. So any access is not just outside the cluster. Any access is always protected by default. You always get any service you develop is secure. The other way to look at this is for people building these container applications, right? There are cross-cutting concerns. Hey, I'm building an application. Do I need to add OAuth to all my applications? Or do I need to do quota for all my applications? Do I need to do caching for all of my applications? Or you can externalize all of this and embed the gateway at that layer. So this distributed gateway mechanism allows you to embed API management within your pod, and wherever it's deployed, it's not just a pod. I mean, typically you can deploy wherever you want. In this use case, you can embed within the pod, and you get this policy enforced. I think the really cool thing about this is all these policies are configured centrally, and they're distributed wherever they are deployed. So that's the key message. So now with this architecture, your application or microservice, what you develop, by default is protected, and by default has this characteristic of all these services.
So Mukunda, before we go into the demo of this thing, so would you say what should be the guidance to our customers? Should they have this kind of approach for every microservice they build, and if so, why?
So that's a good question, Bala. So I think the way we are thinking about this, right? So we have been talking to a lot of customers. I think what we are hearing is people are building applications, and this microservices and the tooling around the Kubernetes, it makes applications really, really fast. Now, how can you also make sure that these are compliant? And how can you make sure by default any service that is deployed is secure, it is protected, it's not like somebody is trying to attack you and then go down there. So you need this at this layer. So the recommendation, if what we are seeing across our deployment is, one, you need to embed this at this layer. So by default it is protected, it's a simple proxy. You can track not the external consumption, but also microservice to microservice management.
Yep.
And you don't need to worry about service discovery and all this stuff, because the stack already provides it for you. So you don't have to look for, hey, how do you do service discovery? It's all embedded, and then the stack already provides you all this functionality. The second important thing is, this provides a way for you to manage the consumption, which is a really key piece.
Yes.
It's not just putting a gateway. You can throw in any gateway, right? You can. Yes. It's not not just that. Once you do that, how can you publish this API catalog? You develop the API, how fast or how quickly you can publish an API catalog, so somebody can see, oh, you know what, I delivered, next minute I see, okay, this API documentation in the portal, right? If it takes 2 days, then there's no point in delivering this fast, right? So that's the key message I think you start thinking through.
And that could be for both internal developers, and eventually it could also be for external developers.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Okay. Cool. Can we see a demo of this now?
Yes. Let's get a demo. Let me again go back to my screen share. So here I have set up a new pod. It's basically a similar deployment. I'm just deploying my Node.js Hello World proxy, but in this case I'm adding my sidecar container. So we'll look at other options, how we are actually going to add sidecar container automatically without specifying. This is I'm showing explicitly because this is what it's going to look like. And then I'm going to have a service. Services are no different than what I showed earlier. It's very similar. Now let's go ahead and create these services. Okay. So I'm going to again use Kubernetes tooling. So magic here, create demo hello internal deployment. So this is going to deploy my Node.js container along with a sidecar container of the gateway. Now I'm also going to create a new service, demo hello internal service. It created both. So, I mean, this is really cool, right? So if you're building containers, all you have to do to deploy is kubectl create. You don't have to go launch instances, create LBs.
Perfect.
Kubernetes makes it really fast, to get access to all the services, right? So now I have deployed the service. Let's go and describe the service. Hello internal service. And you can see it is of type load balancer, and I get the cluster IP already. Now I can take this cluster IP. Let's see how somebody can access this from within the cluster.
Yes.
So for that, what I'm going to do.
Yep. Yeah, go ahead. No. So you're saying somebody who has access to the cluster is trying to access this particular
Exactly.
service. Okay.
So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually logging into the cluster itself. So I have this cluster running in GCP.
Yep.
So I'm just going to run this. Let's say kubectl get pods. I have a curl pod specifically created so that I can test it from within the container of the Kubernetes cluster. Okay. Let's go ahead and create this, execute this command. So I'm going to log into the container, and then let's do curl of this IP, cluster IP, which is where my service is running.
Yep.
And then -p. Now, as you can see, I'm getting a missing authorization header.
Yes.
because this service is by default protected. So you cannot expose a service that is not secure.
Yes.
That's the way to look at
Yes.
this, right?
Yes.
So now, how would somebody get access to it?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you can go get a token.
Yep.
So there is a token service you have already built,
Mm-hmm.
so which is part of the gateway deployment. I can go get an access token. I can use this access token. Let me copy this guy. Come back here. Okay, I'm just waiting. Okay, there you go. You can see it. curl-v-h authorization bearer token and the IP, which is here. All right. So now when I make this, I pass a valid access token. I see hello world here.
Yes.
So that's the idea. So again, it's similar to what we did the use case 2. I'm still working with the realm of the Kubernetes tooling. I don't have to, the Apigee is completely transparently embedded somewhere.
Correct.
It manages all this stuff. Okay, so now I got the hello world. Now let's go back to our service. So I'm going to just go describe again. Oops, sorry about that. kubectl describe service hello internal service.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, I mean, the reason I'm showing this is because it's also going to create an Apigee endpoint here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it is not just for internal, right? So that's what we talk about here.
Yes.
Any
Correct.
service exposed, be it microservice to microservice or anybody outside your cluster talking to your service, they will all have to go through this layer of security. So now I can go to call this Apigee hello internal service.
Yeah.
I get access denied because the token might be
Same
already
issue,
expired.
yeah.
I'm just going to get a new token and call this. So I get a response back, hello world. I think the key point to talk about here is you get a consistent security authentication scheme for all your services, be it internal or external, and you always have the opportunity to add more layers of security for external access or add another scheme for internal access. But by default, you get all this.
Yes.
You can do traffic management. And more importantly, when you come back to the analytics.
Just wait for the screen
Yeah.
to refresh here.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can actually start seeing all the API traffic, who are the developers who are accessing it, and then even the API traffic for your proxies. So I've been playing around with this proxy, so there is more traffic than what we did. But the idea is you
visibility is automatically there.
Exactly.
Yes.
So average time, errors, and all the bunch of stuff are already captured.
Yeah.
Right? So just to recap, right? So there are two things we talked about. We talked about how people are developing APIs in Kubernetes and what are the access patterns are, internal and external. And we talked about approaches, what we have done to manage them seamlessly. People just do Kubernetes tooling to create a service. They are automatically protected. They automatically have traffic management. They automatically get analytics. And more importantly, which we are not going to cover in this demo, is there is the notion of consumption, where you can go create products. They can automatically publish API catalogs, self-service onboarding for developers, other things, right? So those we don't want to stop too much on that, but you get the idea, right? The Kubernetes integration allows that. If you look at the value chain at the far right, we made this integration really tight. Now you get all the value across the value chain.
Correct. And this picture shows that both you can enable it from a simple security, visibility, and any other things like Spike and Coda very, very easily and embedded for the internal service calls, as well as for anything you want to proxy.
Yes.
And then on top of that, you're also saying that now you also, thanks to Edge, you can have a very common way to look at the entire visibility across all these APIs.
Yes.
And then if you choose to also document and onboard developers for these APIs, internal or external.
I would even go other way. There is no choose to, right? You don't have a choice. You have to publish them, right? You should publish them.
Got it.
Okay.
So again, going back to your starting slide, which I think you made a point, Mukunda, which is that at the end of the day, we're doing all this because we want to make sure that we keep the developer,
who
is the customer or consumer of this API in mind, and make sure that we do all this to provide the right API and the right access and the right control documentation for that person.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
Okay. Now, obviously, we're already starting to get some questions on the Q&A, which is that, hey, all this is really like magic.
Yes.
So how did the magic happen?
As I told you before, 2 and 3 would look like magic.
Yes.
Let's look at.
Yes. So now I think we're going to go under the hood and show people what have we done in terms of tooling to both manage the Kubernetes APIs as well as use the automation with Edge to make the proxy come through automatically as well as the embedded gateway for the internal services. Right?
Yep.
Let's go through that scenario. So do you want to just walk us through the concepts first?
Yes.
Okay.
So let's take this. So we have seen for developers deploying APIs on Kubernetes. Now let's look at the Kubernetes itself, right?
Yeah.
The Kubernetes tooling is a very, very straightforward. And obviously, we have hidden bunch of stuff. The key part here is Kubernetes itself is it has a RESTful API. That's an API server. And kubectl or kubecontrol is basically simply a HTTP client that is talking to the API.
Got it.
Which is great for us because it's a HTTP client which is trying to make calls, for example, create a pod, create a service to an API. So if you're familiar with Edge, so you might already know what we have done. So which is proxying this API, which is basically managing this API, and what we have done exactly that. So we put Edge to manage the Kubernetes API itself.
Yeah.
So let's walk through the integration and also talk about what value it provides. It's not just this integration for API developers, but as internally we are using, right? We have multiple teams using Kubernetes, and then we had these problems of, hey, how do you manage teams, credentials? This was like a really good solution. How we can actually take Kubernetes and manage them and provide access to a lot of different teams and managing environments. Which will cover that. So the idea is the way we did 2 and 3 is by managing the Kubernetes API itself through Edge. And that's the integration story we are going to talk about now.
Okay, let's go through the demo now.
Let's quickly do a demo. What does the tooling looks like, and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
So there are again 2 parts to this demo. 2 parts to this integration story, right? One, as a Kubernetes administrator or somebody who set up the Kubernetes cluster, there are 2 things. There is one thing you need to do. So I think the way we are thinking about this is you would have some kind of a tooling or command line utility that will help you set it up. So now what happens here is, let me go to APIs. That tooling, what will allow you to do is, as a Kubernetes admin, when you run the tooling, it's going to create this kube API proxy.
Okay.
And we have created all these templates for you by default. For example, I'm showing a sample which does service orchestration. So I have all this managing services and other stuff. And it also integrates with our identity store, which is our Apigee SSO.
Yeah.
So now let me run trace and show you what really happens, right? So as administrator, there's a tool you can run that will automatically provision the kube API on Apigee.
Got it.
As a client, you don't have to do anything. Basically, you have to set up Kubernetes context. Your administrator will provide you the context.
Correct.
So in this case, I will do things like set kube context, and it's going to set my context. And if you look at this, there's no magic here. I'm just getting an access token from Apigee. So this is the key piece, right? If you are working with Kubernetes, right? So you set up, let's say Kubernetes cluster in the cloud. You basically get a one-time token or certificate, and that's it. It stays there. And people often share certificates and do all. This is a new identity mechanism that brings in, right? Now with Apigee, what you can do is you can integrate with your existing identity systems, your Active Directory, your Ping Federate, or whatever existing identity solution you have, you can integrate with that. In this case, we are actually taking advantage of our own SSO solution. People should be able to log in with their SSO, and then I'm setting my context to Apigee, I'm a demo for. So now what happens is, let's say I do, they're not seeing it, so let's say I do get pods. All these calls are actually going to Apigee. So what kubectl thinks is, it is thinking Apigee is a Kubernetes cluster.
Correct.
And if you come back here, we are managing all the API calls.
Yeah.
And we know who the user is, and we know what the roles are.
Yeah.
And we can manage access permissions, whether they have access to this particular cluster, whether they have access to a particular namespace, or whether they have access to a particular environment.
Got it. So
this is how the integration would look like for a end user and the Kubernetes administrator. So 2 parts. As administrator, you'll have a tooling that will set up the kube API for your Kubernetes clusters.
Yeah.
As an end user, all I have to do is set up my kube context to point to Apigee, and depending on my role and permissions within the company, I will get access to certain cluster and a namespace.
Perfect.
Right. So that's the whole integration story.
Awesome. So as a user of the Kubernetes cluster, I continue to use all the Kubernetes command from command line, and there's no change on that.
Yes.
Right, number one. As long as I switch the context, I'm good to go.
Yes.
For the administrator, you showed that we have a Kube API proxy. So the idea here is that that proxy will be made available to customers.
Yes.
And when they deploy that proxy, they obviously will have to make any changes they want to. In this case, for example, you said that we've integrated with our SSO.
Correct.
In their case, they may want to integrate with their IDP, right?
Exactly.
Those are the kind of changes they do.
Yeah.
But it's a one-time change. And once the administrator does that,
yes.
then once the Kube API is deployed and the context is set, there's no change in behavior from a developer point of view. And from an administrator point of view, you get all the visibility.
Yes.
And things like that,
this,
right?
This is important because if you remember, right, when we started doing Kubernetes internally, people were sharing kubeconfig files.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's no, people are sharing credentials.
Yeah.
There's no way to find who is doing what. And now this provides a clear way to manage access control.
Yes.
You know what? You have multiple teams. Typically, people create namespace. So how do you make sure somebody is not deploying the wrong namespace?
Got it.
Very simple, right?
Got it.
Obviously, Kubernetes is coming up with this one set of tooling. Now they have OpenID Connect.
Yep.
But I think our approach is, you know what? This is an API, and this needs to be managed like any other API.
Got it.
Right? And that's where the key difference.
Yeah, because that's going to be the most of the questions customers are going to have is that, hey, we already, I'm
I've
sure this is
already
a feature Kubernetes is going to build.
Yes.
And if Kubernetes allows me to integrate with some IDP, then why do I need to proxy? And your
Yes.
point is the IDP and SSO integration is just one piece.
Yes.
And beyond that,
There's
you can do
lot
all
of-
the traditional
exactly.
API management in terms of visibility,
Yes.
adding other things,
But
granular.
it's just one of the other 100 problems you will run into
Correct.
before you get
Correct.
there, right? So
Got
that's
it.
where we are trying. That's where we are getting to.
Perfect. So if you were to recap the benefits of
Yeah.
why you would proxy all your Kubernetes APIs
Yes.
through Edge,
Yeah.
so this is what effectively it
I think
becomes.
this is purely from an administration perspective.
Correct.
Apart from whatever the value we offer for developers
Yes.
using Kubernetes. So they don't need to worry about whether I'm in the right namespace,
Yeah.
whether I'm trying to test environment or production environment.
Yes.
So Apigee can route to different. So since we are a multi-tenant platform, so it makes it really easy for us to provide multi-tenancy for the Kubernetes cluster.
Got it.
Manage namespaces, manage different clusters, manage SDLC environments, what we have. So Apigee environment could map to the Kubernetes environment. It could be a different cluster, could be a
Makes
different
sense.
region. So
Makes sense.
we will manage that.
Got it.
Plus, from an administration standpoint, it makes authentication authorization easier.
Yes.
So you don't have to go create new private keys, public key, and then send this key. This is like breaking the whole stuff,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
You don't share kubeconfig files.
Correct.
People can log in with their corporate identity.
Yes.
They can log in with their token, username, password, whatever it is, and if they have access, they will be routed to appropriate Kubernetes cluster.
Got it.
They will have appropriate permission to these applications. Onboarding multiple teams. Kubernetes is great getting started. You saw how fast we are able to deploy applications.
Yep.
It's so cool when you get started.
Yes.
And now when you go, you know what? Okay, let's add one more guy to this, and that's where you start thinking, okay, how do I do that?
Yes.
So scaling this process across the organization, I think is the key piece, right?
Got
So, and that's what I mean. This is the value chain story.
Yes.
And this is exactly what you preach, right? And if you treat this as either API and manage it, so you get all the benefits.
Yes.
Develop an environment. How do you manage SDLC? So internally we run multiple clusters.
Yep.
Some people do different namespaces, even for different teams. So it could be different. So there's a easier way to manage at edge, and more importantly, audit and compliance.
Yeah.
Now, since you know who the users are,
Got it.
what roles, what team belong to, you can clearly know who is doing what, who is deploying what, who has access to what, and whatever you publish is by default secure.
Got it. Great. So let's kind of recap here quickly. So we kind of did 4 things.
Yeah.
We went through a quick Kubernetes refresher.
Yeah.
We walked through an example of how an external developer consumption happens for an API and Kubernetes.
Right.
And we showed a very clean, easy, native way to do that.
Yep.
We did the same thing for internal developer consumption, right? And then we kind of then went into and showed behind the scenes what we did for the Kubernetes API itself through managing through Edge to make
I think
all
one
the
of the
magic
things
happen.
we did not show is when we say Kubernetes tooling, it's not just a kube control.
Yeah.
Developers will be able to access the Kubernetes UI
In the same fashion.
In the same fashion,
Correct,
right?
correct.
There's no change, right?
Yes.
Once you set it up, so Apigee will be transparently hidden somewhere. it is there. It's showing all the value.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So again, in terms of if we were to summarize in terms of a picture, going back,
Yeah.
So there is both the left side and the right side, right? So the left side kind of shows how an external access happens and how we manage that through Apigee Edge, including the internal access where the gateways are still there and deployed as a sidecar container, but the configurations are being pushed by Edge, either in on-premises or in the cloud. And that way you have one holistic view of everything that's happening with developers and applications or APIs in that ecosystem, right? And then to make that magic happen on the right side, we did the proxying of the actual Kubernetes APIs. And there again, if you want, as the administrator of the Kubernetes cluster, you get the same advantage of looking at all the users, the visibility, the security controls you want to implement, and things like that.
Correct.
Right?
No, absolutely, yeah. So I think one other point I just want to emphasize is there is a consumption side of things, there is a API provider side of things, but there are two edge boxes. So they are logically just one. I mean, logically they're shown separate, but physically there's just one edge. Here in my example, you have seen, it's just one edge, which allows you to manage the administrative part of it and also the consumption part of it.
Absolutely. So this is a summary view, right? So in terms of if you really look at the benefits, we're saying if you look at the consumption side, it's security, how do you create API products, how do you onboard developers, how do you create a nice catalog, make it all self-service. And from the exposure point of view, as administrator or the API team, you can control that with security, manage multiple teams, multiple environments, and multiple clusters on Kubernetes, again using Edge. And this all can be one edge. That's your
one
point,
edge,
basically.
And self-service for API developers and API consumers.
Correct.
And scaling to across multiple teams.
Perfect.
So that's the whole.
So this, I feel like we are in an Inception kind of movie, right? Where it's a dream within a dream kind of thing. So let's take it one more level. So the obvious other question customers are going to ask is like, wait a second, like Apigee Edge can be deployed on premises. And Apigee Edge can also be used as a SaaS product.
Correct.
Then on top of that, you can have now Kubernetes also can be deployed on premises. Or Kubernetes can be consumed on any public cloud, be it AWS, Google Cloud, and others, right? So what is the combination? Can I go any combination?
You can mix. I think this is in line with what our roadmap is and what we are telling customers. The future is multi-cloud, hybrid, Unity-enabled software working with across multiple clouds. So you could have Kubernetes clusters across multiple clouds or even data centers. Doesn't matter. So this can be anywhere. I think what we have shown so far is just a methodology, right? This methodology can be applied wherever Edge is deployed or wherever Kubernetes is deployed. And you could even technically have multiple Kubernetes clusters across multiple clouds and manage it with one Edge.
That is true. That is true. And so the Edge deployment and Kubernetes can be both on-prem, or one can be on-prem, one can be in cloud, or both can be on cloud. It does not matter. And furthermore, your Kubernetes cluster can also be across multiple clouds or multiple public clouds and private cloud if you choose to do so, and we can still manage that.
And I think the whole point of what we are talking about is speed. And then we talk about speed, so cloud makes
obviously more sense. So with that, I think we should again end on this note, which is that every time we talk to customers, we always go back to the basic kind of first principles, right? Which is that everything we do and everything we should have our customers think about is start with the question, what are we trying to do for the developers? And then if you go from there and do the right things with the APIs, I think the answers always will be the right way.
Correct? This is a great framework, right? This is a frame of reference. For anything we do, if you put this framework, you know what, hey, this is what we are going to do. Are we checking off all the things?
Correct.
You cannot go wrong.
Perfect. Hey, so as we wrap up, Mukunda, obviously the question customers are going to have is like, this may be very exciting, but you've shown some magic. And especially the Kube API proxy, for example, and some of the other tooling we've showed is not right now available easily to customers. And I know this is hot off the presses, and we want to kind of work with some customers who are interested in this. So the request I think we have is for anybody who's listening to the webcast, if you're really interested in being an early adopter, please email us with a request at webcast@apigee.com. Webcast as in plural with an S, webcast@apigee.com. and we will be able to work with them directly and see how we can
Right.
actually have them as an early adopter customer.
Yeah.
Because our plan is to make this available to
So we are
every
talking to
customer
some of
base.
the customer, and then most of the work has been done. So we are facing all these problems internally.
Yes.
And this is basically to address, anybody who's doing Kubernetes, they are also going to run the same problem.
Correct. Yes.
Second, we are also talking to customers, understanding how to shape this in a way that it can be shipped in a generic
Absolutely.
format. Yes.
Absolutely. So we want to hear some feedback. We want to work with a lot of the customers who may be interested in it, especially if you're already on a journey of using Kubernetes and building new applications and microservices and APIs on them. This will be a great partnership. So we would love to work with you guys. So with that, let's go through some questions, Mukunda.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see if we have any questions. But before that, the one thing we do need to talk about is that we are continuing our Adapt or Die World Tour. We already finished San Francisco and New York. Our Chicago one is coming up on November 17th. So if you haven't registered and if you're in the area, please do. And we'll also announcing Sydney and London dates pretty soon. So check our website, adapt.apigee.com, and we'd love to see customers there.
Okay.
So with that, let's go to some of the questions here, and let's see here. Okay, can you elaborate on the gateway container you referred in the internal scenario?
Yeah. So this is in line with what we are doing with distributed gateways. So today we have a micro gateway. So we have enabled micro gateway to be deployed in a Docker container, the local proxy mode. So you could run this without any configuration or with just local configuration, not having to configure this. So as part of our distributed gateway story, you would see a lot more progress in that area. But today the distributed gateway, what I've shown you is basically the container version of the micro gateway.
Our edge micro gateway.
Our edge micro gateway.
Containerized so that you can deploy that easily.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Absolutely. Perfect. Yes, I think there's another question saying the internal gateway seems to be edge micro gateway. Yes, that is correct.
Yes, that is, yeah.
And how can I deploy my customized gateway container with custom plugins?
Yeah. So very straightforward. So if you want to add, the multiple ways you can look at it. So one of the things we are seeing is people are already building APIs. So this is just to manage the security threat protection at that layer. If you really have a need to deploy custom plugins, you could actually build your own container. So the config model is already part of the micro gateway, and now you could actually build your own container. So you can spin up, for example, we have the Docker files. I can share it with you. I think these are some of the things you need to work with the customers,
yes.
and then iron this out. So today you can take edge micro container and deploy as a sidecar.
Yeah.
If you are going to deploy with custom plugins, so you could build your own Docker container.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then there's a question saying Apigee Edge, does it have to be in a cloud offering or can it be in enterprise? Now, as we mentioned, Apigee Edge is available both as a SaaS cloud offering as well as the same stack is available for customers to deploy on premises. And we have a lot of customers who do that as well.
Yeah.
So the question again is, what is the green boxes represented in terms of Kubernetes clusters? I think this is a service abstraction you're talking about.
Correct.
Go ahead.
That's a Kubernetes service. It's a concept. It's a service concept within Kubernetes that provides access to containers deployed in a pod. So that provides service discovery and routing.
Got it.
It's a Kubernetes service.
Perfect. So there's another question called, is there a difference between edge versus the gateway in the pod? Absolutely. So the reason we call out a gateway and then edge separately is that gateway is just our proxy functionality, and even there, I think we have built a set of capabilities which are very unique.
Yeah.
So it is not only just proxying with basic security and quota and spike policies, but we have 30 kind of out-of-the-box policies where you can do things like traffic management, mediation, security policies. On top of that, one of the unique things about the gateway capabilities we have is that it also allows you to take it and extend it. So we allow for you to do callouts using Java, JavaScript, Python, and Node. I think those are very, very unique capabilities that we offer. That's just the gateway. And then on top of that, what we also do is, when it comes to edge, we think of that as the holistic API management, which is what Mukunda was referring to, which is you get everything from how do you kind of create the consumption part, which is having the APIs documented, having onboarding of developers, issuing keys, as well as looking at end-to-end visibility through analytics, right? So all of that is edge, and gateway is one important, but it's one part of the overall story. So that's kind of something we want to create. So how can I create and apply global policy set with every proxy edge deployed? Great question.
Yeah.
So we just announced our release where we have done a beta of this feature, and we call that shared flow and flow hooks.
Yep.
Shared flow is a concept where we're going to allow customers to write their own custom policies, either stringing together our existing policies or stringing together our existing policies with some callouts or by themselves.
Right.
But that can be shared within their context from a customer point of view. So developers within that environment or organization can reuse it. And then flow hooks is where we use those same custom policies to apply across different proxies. In a pre-flow
or level, at an environment level, or at a proxy level.
At a proxy level,
whatever
you can choose, and then it can be applied. So again, if you're interested in knowing more, please do read up our blog. And if you want access to the early adopter program for our global policies, please do again email us at webcast@apigee.com, and we'll get in touch with you. I think we answered the question, which components are made to work behind the scenes for the Kubernetes. I think we kind of showed that magic, what's happening. Just in terms of the internal gateway capabilities, can it support JOT?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It supports JOT.
It supports JOT. And then let's go look at some other questions here. Okay, so I have a couple of questions here, Mukunda, which talks about the fact that all this looks great, but what is the overhead and does it add latency, right? So whether it's for primarily for internal consumption, I guess is the question. So how would we answer that?
Yeah, so this has come up. I mean, obviously, more for internal consumption. If you look at the deployment architecture itself, right? So we are co-locating the gateway within the pod.
Yes.
And this is all internal communications anyways.
Yes.
And most people who have asked us about the perceived latency, when they actually did the test, it wasn't the case. It was just a few milliseconds. And the value you get, so it's not that it's optional thing, can you remove for latency. The value you get is really important. So how can you make sure anything that is exposed by default is secure, is managed, and managed consumption? Plus, the latency, I mean, obviously they're going to be a few milliseconds, but just a few milliseconds, right?
Yeah.
Whether that is what you're looking for, or looking at the value chain as a value.
Perfect. So two answers. One, we do proxying today for a lot of customers using our cloud infrastructure, and we have not found anything significant in terms of latency for the external consumption, which is actually proxying. And the second answer is for the internal use cases where you actually have a sidecar container deployment. It's an internal call. You will take the network latency from cloud to data center, right? So there should not be an effect. Just a semantics issue here. I think the pod we are referring to in the Kubernetes context is not to be confused with anything to do with the pod concepts we have for our product. Sometimes when customers deploy
those are different.
Those are different concepts.
So
there is another question, of course. I think this is something we kind of have the tooling, we haven't described it, and this is where probably we need some early adopter customers to work with. When you deployed the services, you also created the endpoints and Apigee proxies automatically. How did you do that?
So now that we have this QB API set up, so now the proxy is configured to introspect what services you're creating and what endpoint needs to be created. So it's all there in the deployment descriptor. We're just taking advantage of that and then provisioning those endpoints in Apigee.
Okay. Another question, how does the analytics look for the internal calls? So I think the important thing to highlight here is there's no difference.
There is no
right?
difference, exactly.
So I don't know, for people who are not familiar with our product, we capture about 30 odd variables in our analytics for any API call, and this is nothing to do with the payload. That's an extra thing. If you want to capture the payload, you can do that too. And that is what we surface in our analytics dashboard. So when we surface that in our analytics dashboard and any of the reports you can generate, you can slice and dice that by any of those dimensions, right? And that's the beauty of the product out of the gate. So you don't have to do the tooling for getting that particular analytics. And for us, we don't differentiate between internal versus external. As long as you are running either the distributed gateway or the edge micro gateway, or whether you're doing a centralized, the other proxy model, we capture all the variables and the analytics is available to you.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Okay. The example you've shown how I manage external access policies versus internal access policies looks like both will necessarily be the same. No, yes and no, right? So I think in your demo, Mukunda, correct me if I'm wrong, we deliberately took a very narrow set of feature sets, right? So we said when you're deploying it for internal, you don't want to do some heavy-duty transformation, for example, right? So you would typically stick with some security policies. It could be API key verification or OAuth.
The idea is you're anyways building the API.
Correct, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And then you would have analytics, you would have Coda or some Spike, right? That's about it. But if you want to, you can embellish that more, either from an edge micro gateway perspective, you can write some custom plugins, or in the proxy model, obviously you have the whole palette, and you can add anything more if you want in terms of policy. Is that fair?
Correct.
Okay. I think we're almost coming down here to the last 5 minutes. Let's make sure we address all the questions. Can edge be containerized? The answer is part of the roadmap discussion, but there are a few things I want to call out here. I'm assuming you're asking this in the context of having to install on-premises. First and foremost, our install process is now very standard RPM-based install process, so it should work with any automation you have. On top of that, we also just announced the ability to do a Bosch beta install on Public Cloud Foundry if you choose to. So we're making those kind of changes so that you have a very easy way to install Edge on-premises should you choose to. And when I say on-premises, it could be on a private cloud infrastructure like PCF, or it could be on a bare metal, it could be on virtual machines, right? So that's kind of the important piece. Would it be possible to configure auto provisioning of Apigee endpoint?
Yes. So yes, I mean, in fact, the demo what I have shown you so far, this is actually the actual Kubernetes cluster is running in GCE. Yes, you can auto provision. You can take the same approach to first pre-provision all the existing services, and then from then on, all the new services would be created as and when on demand.
Got it. Okay, we have a question. When is shared flow and flow hooks will be released to all customers? We just announced the beta. I think as soon as we get some good feedback from customers and make sure it is functioning as we expect it to, I think we should have this in the hands of all our customers. We are very eager to get it done. The only caveat is that as we get into the holiday season, we typically try and not do too much of code changes and releases to make sure that all our customers, especially retail, and now with the election season, we have a lot of media customers. We do not introduce any new late-breaking changes. But other than that, we are on a path to get this out of the door as fast as we can. Is it possible to integrate with existing security architecture? For example, SiteMinder and other tools for custom-developed security products. I guess if it's an IDP question, right? IDP question, we are saying that we can absolutely integrate with IDPs, existing IDP, for some sort of a authentication mechanism.
You can do that for both, not just for the consumers, but for also developers who are using Kubernetes.
Correct. Right. And I guess we have one last question here, and then I think we can wrap it up, which is that how is Apigee different when it comes to microservices architecture based on Kubernetes as opposed to other solutions? I think this is, you should add to this, Mukunda, but I think of it as differently, right? Which is number one is we've always kept our focus on the developers, number one. Number two, we've always believed that the capabilities of managing APIs, everything from making sure that you are able to protect and do the basics for the API through the gateway, and give the extensibility, give the analytics, give the consumption part very, very well. All those things is what kind of separates us. And number two, we've been doing this in the market as a leader for a long time, and we also have done this, I think, with the largest cloud API platform as well as a private cloud offering, which very few other vendors can even claim to. And last but not the least, we have always worked with any kind of new infrastructure like PCF or Kubernetes very, very well. Right?
I think so. The first 3 points are true, irrespective of whether customers are doing SOA or microservices or anything else. Last point is really key, right? Our architecture enables us to very quickly integrate into new platforms, new microservices stack, and microservice architecture, what customers are doing. So we did Pivotal recently, we are doing Kubernetes, and then based on our customer learning,
feedback, if we have new platform or new stack, we do that.
We're able to quickly add. So that's where the architecture comes into play.
Yeah. Perfect. And again, when you say architecture, we're talking about both scalability aspects and the fact that we have APIs for everything.
APIs for everything, automated, distributed gateways, centralized configuration, distributed enforcement, and automation of the entire value chain.
Perfect. Okay. So with that, I think we pretty much addressed most of the questions here. Let's do one last check. I think the last question is, what is the recommended support model for APIs released with Apigee to third-party developers? I think we have a ton of content on our website in terms of how to run developer programs, what are the best practices, and all those kind of things. So absolutely go read up that and post any questions. Again, I'll remind you, everybody on the call, please let's continue this conversation on community.apigee.com. If you have any questions specific to this particular webcast or any other questions with respect to APIs in general or API programs or Edge as a product, we'll be more than happy to answer them. So with that, again, a quick reminder for those in the Chicago area, we'd love to see you at our Adapt or Die conference, World Tour. And thank you so much for being a participant today in our webinar and having this conversation with us. Again, for early access to what we showed to you, please email webcasts@apigee.com, webcast in plural with an S, and we hope to hear from you. Thank you again so much.